One night, one drink, one kiss that triggered a smart ring alert. He never expected the notification chimed at exactly 2:47 a.m., cutting through the silence of Marcus Chen's penthouse like a knife through silk. He jerked awake from his restless sleep, the blue glow of his phone illuminating the stark modern lines of his minimalist bedroom. The smart ring on his finger had detected an elevated heart rate, irregular sleep patterns, and what the accompanying app cheerfully described as unusual biometric activity consistent with romantic engagement. Marcus stared at the screen, his dark eyes narrowing as the memories of the previous evening crashed back into his consciousness, like waves against a rocky shore. The kiss, that impossibly perfect, earth-shattering kiss that had lasted exactly 47 seconds, according to his ring's precise measurements. A kiss that had somehow managed to infiltrate the sophisticated algorithms of his health monitoring device and broadcast his vulnerability to the digital universe. He sat up in his king-sized bed, running his hands through his disheveled black hair. The Seattle skyline stretched out beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars against the pre-dawn darkness. The Space Needle stood sentinel in the distance, its familiar silhouette a comfort he'd grown accustomed to during his 5 years of calling this city home. But tonight, even the familiar view couldn't calm the storm brewing in his chest. The kiss had been with Emma Rodriguez, a woman he'd met at the most unlikely of places, a 24-hour laundromat in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, where he'd found himself at midnight with a bag of designer shirts that his housekeeper had somehow missed. It was the first time in his 34 years that Marcus Chen, tech billionaire and CEO of Nexus Innovations, had set foot in a public laundromat. The irony wasn't lost on him that the woman who'd turned his perfectly ordered world upside down had been folding her 7-year-old daughter's school clothes on a plastic table that had seen better decades. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing tales like this one. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our amazing community around the world. The smart ring continued its gentle pulsing against his finger, a constant reminder of how thoroughly Emma had disrupted his carefully calibrated existence. Marcus had built his empire on predictability, on algorithms that could forecast human behavior with 97% accuracy. Yet somehow, this single mother working 2 jobs to make ends meet had rendered all his data meaningless, with one look from her warm brown eyes. He remembered how she'd looked that night, her long dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing scrubs from her shift at Seattle General Hospital where she worked as a pediatric nurse. There had been exhaustion etched in the fine lines around her eyes, but also something else, a resilience that spoke of someone who faced each day's challenges head-on, no matter how insurmountable they seemed. When their eyes had met across that fluorescent-lit laundromat, Marcus had felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a teenager, genuine, unfiltered attraction that had nothing to do with his bank account or social status. The conversation had started innocuously enough. Emma's washing machine had broken down. Again, she'd said with a rueful laugh, and she'd been forced to drag 2 loads of laundry across town to the only place still open at that ungodly hour. Marcus, meanwhile, had been there because his live-in housekeeper had quit unexpectedly, citing his impossible standards and inhuman work schedule as primary reasons for her departure. It was the first time he'd done his own laundry since his college days at Stanford, and Emma had taken pity on him when she'd witnessed his confusion over fabric softener versus detergent. "First time?" she'd asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement as she watched him stare at the industrial-sized washing machines like they were alien spacecraft. "That obvious?" Marcus had replied, attempting to maintain some semblance of dignity while holding a bottle of detergent like it might explode at any moment. Emma had laughed then, a sound that seemed to fill every corner of that dingy laundromat with unexpected warmth. "Here, let me help you before you accidentally bleach everything." That simple offer of assistance had led to 2 hours of the most genuine conversation Marcus had experienced in years. They'd talked about everything and nothing while their clothes tumbled through wash and rinse cycles. Emma had shared stories about her daughter Sofia, a precocious second grader, who wanted to be either a marine biologist or a professional soccer player, depending on which documentary she'd watched most recently. Marcus had found himself opening up about his own childhood, growing up as the son of Taiwanese immigrants in San Francisco's Richmond district, where his parents had run a small electronics repair shop and worked 18-hour days to put him through school. The laundromat had become their private world that night, insulated from the chaos of the city beyond its smudged windows. The fluorescent lights had hummed overhead like mechanical cicadas, and the industrial washers had provided a rhythmic soundtrack to their deepening connection. Emma had been folding Sofia's tiny pink t-shirts when she'd mentioned that her ex-husband had walked out when Sofia was 3, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and a mountain of debt that Emma was still chipping away at, payment by painful payment. He said he never signed up to be tied down, Emma had said, her voice matter-of-fact, but her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed out wrinkles in her daughter's school uniform. Funny thing is, neither did I, but sometimes life gives you something so precious that walking away isn't even an option. Marcus had been struck by the quiet strength in her words, the way she spoke about single motherhood not as a burden, but as a choice she made every single day. It was so different from the women he usually encountered in his social circles, women who spoke in carefully modulated tones about charity galas and vacation homes in the Hamptons, women who saw him as a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. As the night had worn on, they'd discovered unexpected common ground. Both had been raised by parents who'd sacrificed everything for their children's futures. Both understood the weight of responsibility and the isolation that often came with success. Emma's success measured not in dollars, but in the bright smile on her daughter's face each morning, in report cards filled with A's and teacher comments praising Sofia's kindness and curiosity. The kiss had happened as they'd been loading their respective clothes into their cars. The Seattle rain had started as a gentle mist, but by the time they'd finished, it had escalated to a proper Pacific Northwest downpour. Emma had been struggling with her overstuffed laundry basket, trying to keep everything dry while fishing for her keys in the depths of a purse that seemed to contain half of CVS Pharmacy. "Here, let me help," Marcus had said, stepping closer to shield her from the rain with his jacket. Their faces had been inches apart, rain droplets clinging to Emma's eyelashes like tiny diamonds. The parking lot had been empty except for their 2 cars, his sleek Tesla Model S and her 15-year-old Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that read, "My kid is an honor student at Stevens Elementary." "This is crazy," Emma had whispered, but she hadn't pulled away. "Completely insane," Marcus had agreed, but his hand had already been reaching up to cup her face, his thumb gently brushing away a raindrop from her cheek. The kiss had been everything his smart ring had recorded, and more. Soft at first, tentative, like a question being asked. Then deeper, more certain, as if they'd both decided that sometimes the most logical thing to do was to throw logic out the window entirely. Marcus had tasted coffee on her lips, and something indefinably sweet that might have been hope. When they'd finally broken apart, both breathless, Emma had looked at him with an expression that was equal parts wonder and terror. "I don't even know your last name," she'd said. "Chen," Marcus had replied. "Marcus Chen." Emma had nodded slowly, as if filing away this crucial piece of information. "Well, Marcus Chen, this has been—" She'd paused, searching for words. "This has been the most unexpected night I've had in a very long time." They'd exchanged phone numbers with the awkward enthusiasm of teenagers, both knowing that whatever had happened between them in that laundromat was too significant to be dismissed as a chance encounter. Marcus had watched Emma drive away in her tired Honda, her taillights disappearing into the Seattle night, and he'd stood there in the rain for a full 5 minutes afterward, trying to process what had just happened to his carefully ordered existence. Now, 3 hours later, Marcus was wide awake in his penthouse, staring at the smart ring notification that had quantified his emotional upheaval into neat digital metrics. Heart rate variability, significantly elevated, sleep efficiency, severely compromised, stress indicators, through the roof. The algorithms had detected what Marcus was only beginning to acknowledge, that Emma Rodriguez had managed to crack open something in his chest that he'd thought was permanently sealed shut. Marcus swung his legs out of bed and padded barefoot across his hardwood floors to the kitchen. The penthouse was a study in modern minimalism. All clean lines and expensive materials, chosen more for their aesthetic value than their warmth. The kitchen was a marvel of German engineering, with appliances that cost more than most people's cars. But as Marcus stood there making coffee with his top-of-the-line espresso machine, he found himself thinking about the instant coffee Emma had offered to share from her thermos at the laundromat. "I know it's not much," she'd said, unscrewing the cap and releasing a cloud of steam into the cool air. "But it's warm, and it's got enough caffeine to wake the dead." The coffee had been terrible, bitter and over-extracted, but Marcus had accepted it gratefully and discovered that bad coffee shared with good company was infinitely better than perfect coffee consumed alone. His phone buzzed, interrupting his reverie. A text message from his assistant, Jennifer, despite the early hour. "Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. Peterson wants to discuss Q4 projections. Your 10 a.m. with TechCrunch also confirmed." Marcus stared at the screen, the words seeming to come from another universe entirely. His normal life, the one filled with board meetings and quarterly projections and carefully orchestrated media appearances, felt suddenly foreign, like a suit that no longer fit properly. He set the phone aside without responding, something that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. Instead, he found himself pulling up Emma's contact information, her number glowing on his screen like a beacon. Emma Rodriguez, with a little heart emoji next to her name that he'd added impulsively in the parking lot. He'd never put emoji in anyone's contact information before. The fact that he'd done so automatically, without thinking, was perhaps more telling than the kiss itself. What would he say to her? "Good morning, I know it's not even 3 a.m., but I can't stop thinking about you. My smart ring detected our kiss and now I'm having an existential crisis." There was no protocol for this situation. No algorithm that could guide him through the maze of emotions currently short-circuiting his rational mind. Marcus walked to his living room windows, coffee mug in hand, and looked out over the city he'd conquered through sheer force of will and technological innovation. Seattle spread before him like a circuit board, each light representing someone else's life, someone else's dreams and struggles and midnight trips to laundromats. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably sleeping, maybe dreaming of marine biology or soccer balls, unaware that she'd set off a chain reaction that was currently reshaping the molecular structure of Marcus Chen's universe. The smart ring pulsed again, this time detecting elevated stress hormones and recommending a meditation session. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. His life's work involved creating technology that could predict and optimize human behavior. Yet here he was, completely at the mercy of emotions that defied every algorithm he'd ever written. He thought about Emma's hands as she'd folded her daughter's clothes, the way she'd handled each small garment with such care, as if every sock and t-shirt was precious. Those same hands had touched his face in the parking lot, had tangled in his hair during that kiss that had apparently triggered a biological revolution his smart ring was still trying to process. Marcus had built his fortune on the principle that data could solve any problem, that human behavior was ultimately predictable if you had enough processing power and the right variables. But Emma Rodriguez had introduced a variable into his equation that no amount of computing power could quantify. Genuine, uncalculated affection from someone who had no idea who he was or what he was worth. She'd seen him as just Marcus, a guy who didn't know the difference between fabric softener and detergent, who'd been willing to sit on uncomfortable plastic chairs in a fluorescent-lit laundromat and listen to stories about a 7-year-old's dreams of swimming with dolphins. Emma had no idea that the man who'd kissed her in the rain was worth more than most small countries' GDP, that his face regularly graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes, that he'd been named to Time magazine's list of most influential people under 43 years running. The anonymity had been intoxicating. For the first time since Nexus Innovations had gone public 5 years ago, Marcus had been able to exist without the weight of expectations and assumptions that came with his public persona. He'd been able to be vulnerable, To admit that he was lonely, despite being surrounded by employees and acquaintances and sycophants who hung on his every word. The coffee was cooling in his hands, but Marcus barely noticed. His mind was replaying every moment of those 2 hours, analyzing Emma's expressions and gestures like they contained the secrets of the universe. The way she'd tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she'd talked about her dreams of going back to school for a master's degree in pediatric nursing. The way her whole face had lit up when she'd shown him pictures of Sofia on her cracked phone screen, a gap-toothed grin beneath a mop of dark curls that were obviously inherited from her mother. "She wants to save the whales," Emma had said, scrolling through photos with the pride that only parents could truly understand. Last week it was the sea turtles. Before that, she was convinced she needed to protect the polar bears from global warming. "She's got the biggest heart in the world, and sometimes I worry the world is going to break it." "Sounds like she gets that from her mom," Marcus had replied. And the smile Emma had given him in response had been worth more than every board meeting he'd ever conquered. Now, alone in his penthouse with nothing but the city lights and his smart ring's incessant data collection for company, Marcus was beginning to understand what Emma had meant about things being too precious to walk away from. The problem was, he had no idea how to walk towards something like this either. His world was built on control, controlling variables, controlling outcomes, controlling the narrative of his own success. But Emma represented chaos in the most beautiful sense of the word. She was unpredictable not because she was trying to be, but because she was authentic in a way that Marcus had almost forgotten was possible. The smart ring pulsed again, and this time Marcus looked at the notification with genuine curiosity. His heart rate had stabilized, but his sleep patterns were still showing significant disruption. The app was recommending chamomile tea and white noise, standard protocols for processing stress. But this wasn't stress. This was something else entirely. Something that his carefully programmed devices couldn't categorize or solve. Marcus finished his coffee and walked to his home office, a shrine to technological efficiency with multiple monitors and ergonomic furniture that had been featured in Architectural Digest. He sat down at his computer and pulled up the Nexus Innovations employee database, scrolling through thousands of profiles until he found what he was looking for. He'd hired Emma's type before, dedicated healthcare workers who'd applied for positions in their medical device division. People who understood both the human cost of illness and the potential for technology to alleviate suffering. But he wasn't thinking about hiring Emma. He was thinking about how to see her again without revealing that he was the kind of person who could afford to buy the hospital where she worked, without noticing the expense on his monthly statement. The deception hadn't been intentional. When Emma had asked what he did for work, Marcus had simply said technology, which was true if incomplete. When she'd mentioned that rent in Seattle was getting impossible for regular people to afford, he'd nodded sympathetically, because he'd read the same statistics, even if he'd never personally felt the impact of housing costs on his quality of life. But now the omission felt like a lie by implication, and Marcus was faced with a dilemma he'd never encountered before. How do you tell someone that you're falling for them when revealing your true identity might change everything about how they see you? His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his brother David, who lived in Portland and had no compunctions about texting at inappropriate hours. "Heard through the startup grapevine that you disappeared from the Hartwell party early last night. Everything okay? You never skip networking opportunities." Marcus stared at the message, remembering the party he'd left to do laundry. The Hartwell party, a monthly gathering of Seattle's tech elite held in a Bellevue mansion that overlooked Lake Washington. He'd been expected to attend, had even RSVP'd weeks in advance. Instead, he'd spent the evening in a laundromat with a woman who'd never heard of venture capital and thought IPO was probably some kind of medical abbreviation. He typed back, "Everything's fine, just needed some air." David's response came immediately. "Since when do you need air? You're like a vampire. You thrive in those networking environments." Seriously, what's going on? Marcus considered his brother's question. David was the only person who remembered what Marcus had been like before the money, before the success, before he'd learned to navigate the world of billion-dollar acquisitions and strategic partnerships. David had been there during their childhood in San Francisco, when Marcus had been the weird kid who'd taken apart every electronic device their parents owned just to understand how they worked. Met someone, Marcus typed, then deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Finally settled on, just taking some time to think. About what? Marcus set the phone aside without responding. How could he explain to David, who'd built a comfortable but modest life as a software engineer, that he'd met someone who made him want to be a different version of himself? Someone who made him question whether the empire he'd built was worth the isolation it required? The smart ring pulsed yet again, and Marcus finally pulled it off his finger, setting it on his desk where it continued to glow hopefully, waiting for him to sync his data and provide more metrics for analysis. But some things, Marcus was beginning to realize, couldn't be quantified. Some things had to be felt, experienced, lived through without the safety net of predictive algorithms and risk assessments. He thought about Emma's daughter Sofia, 7 years old, and determined to save the world's marine life. There had been something in Emma's voice when she talked about her daughter's dreams, a kind of fierce protectiveness mixed with admiration for the child's unwavering optimism. Marcus had never considered having children. His life was too consuming, too unpredictable despite all his efforts at control. But listening to Emma talk about Sofia had planted something in his mind, a tiny seed of possibility that he wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. The rain was still falling against his penthouse windows, and Marcus found himself wondering if Emma was awake too, maybe lying in her bed and replaying the same moments that were keeping him from sleep. Did she understand the significance of what had happened between them? Or was he reading too much into a kiss shared between strangers in a parking lot? His laptop chimed with an incoming email marked high priority. Jennifer, his assistant, despite the early hour, had sent him his schedule for the next day. Board meeting at 9, lunch with potential investors at noon, conference call with the Tokyo office at 3, dinner with the mayor's economic development team at 7. A typical day in the life of Marcus Chen, tech mogul, and Seattle's most eligible bachelor according to Seattle Met magazine's annual feature. But as he read through the scheduled appointments, each one felt like another brick in a wall he was suddenly desperate to tear down. When was the last time he'd done something simply because he wanted to, not because it advanced his business interests or maintained his carefully cultivated public image? The answer came to him immediately. Last night, in a laundromat on Capitol Hill, when he'd spent 2 hours talking to a woman who'd offered to share her terrible instant coffee and hadn't once asked him about his net worth or his 5-year plan for market domination. Marcus closed his laptop and walked back to the kitchen, where he made himself another cup of coffee. This time the instant variety he'd bought on impulse during a late-night grocery run the week before. It tasted exactly as bad as Emma's had, and somehow that made it perfect. He was stirring in sugar when his phone rang, the sound cutting through the pre-dawn quiet like an alarm. The caller ID showed his mother's number, and Marcus answered immediately, knowing that she never called unless something was wrong. "Marcus?" His mother's voice was tight with worry. "I'm sorry to call so early, but your father—" "What happened?" Marcus interrupted, his stomach dropping. "He's fine," she said quickly. "He's fine, but he had chest pains last night and we went to the emergency room. They're keeping him for observation." Marcus was already moving toward his bedroom, phone pressed to his ear. "Which hospital? I'll catch the first flight to San Francisco." "UCSF Medical Center. But Marcus, you don't need to." "I'm coming," Marcus said, pulling clothes from his closet. "I'll be there by noon." "The doctors say it might just be stress," his mother continued. "He's been working too much again, staying late at the shop. I keep telling him he needs to retire, but you know how he is." Marcus did know. His father, at 68, still put in 10-hour days at the electronics repair shop that had put Marcus through Stanford and funded his first startup. Thomas Chen was a man who measured his worth in work completed, problem solved, customers satisfied. In many ways, Marcus realized, he'd inherited more from his father than just entrepreneurial drive. "I'll be there soon, Mom. Try to get some rest." After he hung up, Marcus stood in his bedroom holding a shirt he'd been about to pack. and suddenly the events of the previous evening took on a different cast. His father's health scare felt like a message from the universe, a reminder that life was fragile and unpredictable despite all efforts to control it. He thought about Emma, probably just getting home from her shift at the hospital where she spent her days caring for sick children and their terrified parents. She understood mortality in a way that Marcus, despite all his success, had somehow managed to avoid. She faced human fragility every day and still managed to find joy in small moments, in her daughter's laughter, in shared coffee with a stranger, in the possibility of connection despite all the reasons it might not work out. As Marcus packed for his unexpected trip to San Francisco, he made a decision. When he got back to Seattle, he was going to call Emma. He was going to ask her out on a proper date, somewhere nicer than a fluorescent-lit laundromat, and somehow, he was going to figure out how to tell her who he really was, without losing the person he'd been able to become in her presence. The smart ring sat on his desk, still glowing, still collecting data that would ultimately be meaningless in the face of what really mattered. Marcus picked it up and slipped it back onto his finger, not because he needed its metrics, but because it had detected something true, that in one night, one unexpected encounter, one perfect kiss, everything had changed. And for the first time in years, Marcus Chen was genuinely excited to see what would happen next. 3 days later, Marcus stood outside Seattle General Hospital, holding a coffee carrier with 2 cups and feeling more nervous than he had before his first board presentation. His father was stable. The chest pains had indeed been stress-related, and 2 days of enforced rest had worked better than any medication. But the trip to San Francisco had given Marcus time to think, and all of his thinking had led him back to Emma. He'd texted her the day before, a carefully casual message. "Hope you and Sofia are doing well. Would love to buy you a better cup of coffee when you have time." Her response had come 3 hours later. "Sofia's convinced the coffee shop near the hospital has the best hot chocolate in Seattle. She might be biased, but I trust her judgment. I get off shift at 2 p.m. tomorrow if you want to test her theory." Now Marcus was second-guessing everything. The coffee shop Emma had mentioned was a tiny place called Muddy Waters, wedged between a vintage clothing store and a used bookshop in the hospital district. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see mismatched furniture and local art covering every available wall surface. It was the kind of place he'd never normally enter, and somehow that felt perfect. Emma appeared at exactly 2:15, still wearing her scrubs and looking tired but happy. Her hair was pulled back in the same messy bun she'd worn at the laundromat, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken at the sight of her walking toward him through the Seattle drizzle. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slightly out of breath. "Emergency surgery ran long, and then I had to check on a patient who's been asking for me specifically all week." "No problem at all," Marcus replied, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the coffee shop. "Rough day?" Emma shrugged, but Marcus could see the exhaustion in the set of her shoulders. 7-year-old came in with appendicitis. Scared out of his mind, parents completely panicked. But he's going to be fine, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. They settled into a corner table at Muddy Waters, surrounded by the warm buzz of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. Emma ordered a vanilla latte, and Marcus got black coffee, both of them suddenly awkward now that they were sitting across from each other in daylight. "So?" Emma said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Technology, right? That's what you said you do." Marcus nodded, his heart rate spiking. "Software development mostly. Data analysis, predictive algorithms, that kind of thing." It was true, if incomplete. Emma seemed to accept this explanation, though Marcus caught her studying his clothes with a slight frown. His jeans were designer, his sweater cashmere, his watch a limited edition Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's annual salary. He'd tried to dress down, but apparently his idea of casual still screamed expensive. "Must be doing well for yourself," Emma observed, her tone carefully neutral. "I've been fortunate," Marcus said, which was perhaps the biggest understatement of his life. They talked for an hour, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in the laundromat. Emma told him about Sofia's latest obsession, a documentary about octopi that had convinced her that cephalopods were the most intelligent creatures on Earth. Marcus found himself laughing genuinely for the first time in days, enchanted by the 7-year-old's logic and Emma's obvious pride in her daughter's curiosity. "She wants to meet you," Emma said suddenly, then blushed. "I mean, she's curious about the man who helped her mom with the laundry. I might have mentioned you were nice." Marcus felt something warm unfold in his chest. "I'd love to meet her." "Really? You don't have to say that. I know not everyone is comfortable around kids." "No, I mean it. She sounds amazing." Emma's smile was radiant. "She is. She's the best thing I ever did, even if she does eat cereal for dinner sometimes and insists on wearing her soccer uniform to bed." They made plans to meet that weekend at the Seattle Aquarium, Sofia's current favorite destination. As they prepared to leave, Emma hesitated, her hand on her purse strap. "Marcus," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" His stomach clenched. "Of course." "That night at the laundromat, was it just me or was there something?" "It wasn't just you," Marcus said quietly. "Definitely wasn't just you." Emma nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Good. I was starting to think maybe I'd imagined it." They parted with a brief hug, and Marcus watched Emma walk back toward the hospital, her scrubs bright against the gray Seattle afternoon. He sat in his Tesla for several minutes afterward, trying to process the conversation and his growing feelings for this woman who was so different from anyone he'd ever been involved with. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "TechCrunch wants to reschedule interview to Friday. Also, Seattle Met wants to do a feature on your penthouse for their Homes of the Elite series. Shall I confirm both?" Marcus stared at the message, reality crashing back over him like a cold wave. Friday was when he was supposed to meet Emma and Sofia at the aquarium. The TechCrunch interview was important. They were planning to announce Nexus Innovations' latest acquisition, a deal worth $800 million that would expand their medical device division globally. He typed back, "Reschedule TechCrunch to Monday. Cancel the Seattle Met feature." Jennifer's response was immediate. "Cancel Seattle Met. They've been trying to book this for months. Your publicist will not be happy." Marcus turned off his phone without responding. For the first time in his professional life, a magazine feature about his lifestyle felt not just unimportant, but potentially dangerous. What if Emma saw it? What if she realized that the man she was having coffee with owned the kind of penthouse that got featured in Seattle Met's Elite Home series? Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, typical Pacific Northwest weather that Marcus had learned to love during his years in Seattle. He met Emma and Sofia at the aquarium entrance, spotting them immediately in the crowd of families and tourists. Sofia was exactly as he'd imagined from Emma's descriptions, all energy and enthusiasm, bouncing on her toes as she waited in line. "Are you Marcus?" Sofia asked directly, looking up at him with dark eyes that were a perfect miniature version of her mother's. "I am. You must be Sofia. Your mom tells me you're an expert on marine life." Sofia beamed. "I know everything about octopi. Did you know they have 3 hearts? And they can change color to match anything, even things that don't exist yet in their brains." "I did not know that," Marcus said, charmed by her enthusiasm. "That sounds like a superpower." "Mom says superpowers aren't real, but I think she's wrong. Some animals just hide their superpowers better than others." Emma laughed, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Sorry, she's been rehearsing her octopus facts all week. Fair warning, you're about to get a very thorough marine biology education." The 3 of them spent the next 4 hours exploring every exhibit in the aquarium. Sofia was an enthusiastic tour guide, sharing facts about sea otters and explaining the complex social structures of wolf eels with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. Marcus found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions that made Sofia light up with excitement. "Most grown-ups just pretend to listen," Sofia confided as they watched the giant Pacific octopus demonstrate its color-changing abilities. "But you ask good questions. Mom, he asks really good questions." Emma smiled at Marcus over her daughter's head. and he felt that same electrical current that had sparked between them in the laundromat. But now, it was more complex, layered with the warmth of watching Emma with her daughter and the unexpected joy of seeing the world through a 7-year-old's eyes. They had lunch at the Aquarium Cafe, Sofia chattering about marine biology programs at the University of Washington while she worked her way through fish and chips that were almost bigger than she was. Marcus listened to her dreams and plans, struck by the casual way she assumed she'd be able to attend college, get advanced degrees, save the world's oceans. It was the kind of confidence that came from having a mother who made sacrifices every day to ensure her daughter never doubted her own potential. "What about you, Marcus?" Sofia asked, interrupting his thoughts. "What did you want to be when you were little?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him about childhood dreams rather than 5-year business plans? "I wanted to invent things that would help people," he said slowly. "I thought maybe I could build robots that would do dangerous jobs so people wouldn't get hurt." "That's a good dream," Sofia said seriously. "Did you do it?" Marcus considered the question. Had he? Nexus Innovations had certainly created technology that helped people, medical devices that diagnosed illnesses earlier, software that streamlined healthcare delivery, algorithms that predicted and prevented system failures in hospitals. But somewhere along the way, the helping people part had gotten buried under profit margins and market share, and the relentless pressure to grow bigger, faster, more efficiently. "I'm working on it," he said finally, and Sofia nodded approvingly. After lunch, they walked through Pike Place Market, Sofia marveling at the fish-throwing vendors and begging for samples from every food stall they passed. Emma bought her daughter a small stuffed octopus from one of the tourist shops, and Sofia named it immediately. "This is Dr. Tentacles," she announced. "He's going to help me study cephalopod behavior." "Dr. Tentacles is an excellent name for a research partner," Marcus said seriously, and Sofia grinned at him with pure delight. As they walked back toward Emma's car, Sofia skipping ahead with Dr. Tentacles, Emma touched Marcus's arm gently. "Thank you," she said. "She's had the best day. It's been a while since she's had someone besides me to share her enthusiasms with. Thank you for including me. She's incredible, Emma. You've done an amazing job with her." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly. "It's not always easy, raising her alone. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water, but she makes it all worthwhile." They reached Emma's Honda, and Marcus helped load Sofia's new treasures into the back seat. As Emma buckled Sofia in, Marcus could hear the 7-year-old already making plans for Dr. Tentacles' research career. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" Marcus asked as Emma closed the car door. "Just the two of us when you can find a babysitter." "I'd like that," Emma said, and her smile made Marcus feel like he could probably power the entire city's electrical grid. They made plans for the following Friday, dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Emma's neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk without the distractions of marine life or 7-year-old commentary. As Marcus watched them drive away, Sofia waving enthusiastically from the back seat, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the simple happiness of having spent a day doing exactly what he wanted to do, with people he genuinely cared about. His phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the day, messages from his assistant and various business contacts that he'd ignored completely. Now he pulled it out to find 17 missed calls, 43 unread text messages, and 12 emails marked urgent. The most recent text was from his brother David. "Dude, you're all over the Seattle tech blogs. Someone posted photos of you at the aquarium with a woman and kid. Internet is losing its collective mind, trying to figure out who your mystery family is. You might want to call Jennifer before this gets completely out of hand." Marcus's blood ran cold. He quickly pulled up the tech blog David had mentioned, and there they were, multiple photos of him, Emma, and Sofia at the aquarium. The images were slightly blurry, obviously taken with a phone camera from a distance, but they were clear enough to identify all three of them. The headline read, "Nexus Innovations CEO Marcus Chen's Secret Family Day Out." The article was full of speculation about Emma's identity, with several commenters already trying to track down information about her and Sofia. Marcus felt sick. In his desire to spend a normal day with Emma and her daughter, he'd forgotten that his life was never truly private, that there were always people watching, always cameras ready to capture any deviation from his carefully managed public persona. His phone rang, Jennifer's contact information appearing on the screen. Marcus answered immediately. "Where have you been?" Jennifer's voice was sharp with stress. "I've been trying to reach you all day. The photos are everywhere. And I've already had calls from 3 different gossip sites wanting confirmation about your relationship status." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, obviously. But Marcus, we need to get ahead of this. Who is she? How serious is this? Do we need to prepare a statement?" Marcus looked back toward where Emma's car had disappeared into Seattle traffic, carrying the woman and child who had become the center of his universe in just 1 week. The thought of reducing them to a press statement made him feel physically ill. "No statement," he said firmly. "This is private. Nothing about your life is private, and you know that. If this relationship is serious, we need to manage the narrative before someone else does it for us." Marcus closed his eyes, finally understanding the full weight of what he'd done by pursuing Emma without telling her who he really was. He'd put her and Sofia in the spotlight without their knowledge or consent, and now photographers were probably already trying to track down Emma's address, her workplace, Sofia's school. "Jennifer," he said quietly, "I need you to hire security. Discreet protection for Emma Rodriguez and her daughter Sofia. They live in Capitol Hill. I'll send you the address. And I need you to contact every media outlet that's posted these photos and make it clear that the child's face cannot be published under any circumstances." "Marcus, no questions right now. Just do it, and cancel everything on my schedule for Monday. I need to have a conversation with Emma before this gets any worse." Marcus hung up and sat in his Tesla in the aquarium parking lot, watching families head home after their Saturday adventures. He'd spent the most perfect day he could remember, and now he had to figure out how to tell the woman he was falling in love with that he'd accidentally made her and her daughter targets for public scrutiny. The smart ring on his finger pulsed gently, detecting elevated stress hormones and recommending breathing exercises. But no amount of deep breathing was going to fix what Marcus had unleashed with his need for normalcy. He thought about Sofia's excitement over Dr. Tentacles, her innocent joy in sharing her knowledge with someone who listened carefully to her 7-year-old wisdom. The idea that paparazzi might now be camped outside her elementary school made Marcus's chest tighten with a rage he'd never felt before. He drove home through the Seattle evening, already composing the conversation he'd have to have with Emma. How do you tell someone that spending a day at the aquarium with you might have just turned their private life into public entertainment? How do you explain that your feelings for them come with the cost of constant scrutiny and invasion of privacy? The penthouse felt more isolating than ever when Marcus finally reached home. He poured himself a scotch and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights and thinking about Emma putting Sofia to bed, probably reading stories about marine biology and promising more adventures with Dr. Tentacles. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from his mother. "Saw the photos online. She looks lovely, and the little girl is adorable. Dad wants to know when we get to meet them." Marcus almost laughed at the irony. His parents, who'd never interfered in his personal life, were ready to embrace a woman they'd only seen in paparazzi photos. But the woman in question didn't even know who he really was. He thought about the expression on Emma's face when Sofia had introduced Dr. Tentacles, the pure love and pride that had radiated from her as she watched her daughter's excitement. Emma deserved someone who could give her that kind of simple joy without the complications that came with being Seattle's most eligible bachelor. But Marcus was no longer capable of walking away. The smart ring had been right to detect a biological revolution in his system. Emma Rodriguez had changed something fundamental in his chemistry, in his priorities, in his understanding of what actually mattered. Now he just had to figure out how to tell her the truth without losing her in the process. Marcus barely slept that night, alternating between rehearsing his confession to Emma and checking the internet to see how far the story had spread. By Sunday morning, the photos had been picked up by celebrity gossip sites, tech industry publications, and even a few mainstream news outlets intrigued by the mysterious humanizing of Seattle's most notoriously private tech mogul. The security team Jennifer had arranged was already in place, though Emma wouldn't know it. Discreet protection for her and Sofia, extra security at the hospital and Sofia's school, monitoring of online chatter to ensure no one got too close to identifying their personal information. Marcus felt like a stalker, arranging protection for people who had no idea they needed it. But the alternative, leaving Emma and Sofia vulnerable to the kind of media attention that could turn their lives upside down, was unacceptable. He was drinking his third cup of coffee and reading increasingly creative speculation about Emma's identity when his phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and Marcus's heart simultaneously leaped and plummeted. "Hi," he said, trying to sound normal. "Marcus, are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. How was the rest of your weekend?" "Good. Though Sofia hasn't stopped talking about yesterday. She's convinced Dr. Tentacles is going to help her get into marine biology graduate school. I tried to explain that she needs to get through second grade first, but she's not hearing it." Marcus smiled despite his anxiety. "She's got big dreams. The biggest. Which reminds me, she wants to know if you'd like to come to her soccer game next Saturday. It's her first game of the season, and she's very excited to show off her skills. Fair warning, she's more enthusiastic than skilled at this point, but her heart's in the right place." Marcus's chest tightened. By next Saturday, if he was honest with Emma about who he was, she might never want to see him again. Or worse, she might decide that the complications of being involved with him weren't worth the risk to Sofia's privacy and safety. "I'd love to come to her game," he said, because the alternative was admitting that he might not be welcome by then. "Great. It's at 10 a.m. at Volunteer Park. I'll text you the details." There was a pause, and Marcus could hear the sounds of a Sunday morning in the background. Cartoons playing, Sofia's voice chattering away, the domestic symphony of a family starting their day. "Emma," he said, his throat tight. "Yeah?" "I need to tell you something. Could we meet for coffee this afternoon? Just you and me?" Another pause, this one tinged with concern. "Is everything okay? You really do sound strange." It's complicated, but I need to talk to you." "Okay," Emma said slowly. "Sofia's at my neighbor's this afternoon for a play date. I could meet you at 2? "Perfect. Same place as before?" "Muddy Waters. I'll see you there." After she hung up, Marcus sat staring at his phone, trying to figure out how to begin a conversation that might end everything before it had really started. How do you tell someone that the simple life they've built for themselves and their child is about to become infinitely more complicated just because they were kind enough to help a stranger with his laundry? He spent the morning pacing around his penthouse, practicing different versions of his confession. "Emma, I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." Too formal. "So, funny story, I'm actually worth about $4 billion. Too flippant. I need you to know that spending time with you might put you and Sofia in danger from photographers and media attention." Too dramatic. By the time Marcus left for Muddy Waters, he still hadn't settled on the right approach. He just knew that he couldn't continue seeing Emma without telling her the truth, and he couldn't bear the thought of not seeing her at all. Emma was already there when he arrived, sitting at the same corner table they'd occupied earlier in the week. She looked tired, and Marcus wondered if she'd picked up on his strange mood during their phone call. "You look like someone who's about to deliver bad news," Emma said as Marcus sat down across from her. "Not bad news exactly, just complicated news." Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, a gesture Marcus was beginning to recognize as her way of bracing herself for difficult conversations. "Okay, I'm listening." Marcus took a deep breath, all his practiced speeches abandoning him in the face of Emma's direct, trusting gaze. "The night we met, when you asked what I did for work, I said technology. That was true, but it wasn't complete." "Okay." Emma said carefully. What's the complete version? I own a company called Nexus Innovations. We develop software and hardware for various industries, but we specialize in medical technology and data analysis. Emma nodded slowly. That sounds impressive. Is this where you tell me you're secretly unemployed and living off credit cards? No. It's where I tell you that yesterday, someone took photos of us at the aquarium and posted them online. The photos are getting a lot of attention because… Marcus swallowed hard. Because Nexus Innovations is worth several $billion, and apparently I'm considered newsworthy when I'm seen in public with people who aren't part of my usual social circle. The color drained from Emma's face. What kind of photos? Just us walking around, looking at exhibits. Sofia's face is visible in some of them, but I've already had legal send cease and desist letters to any outlet that published her image. Oh God. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. How many people saw them? I don't know exact numbers, but they've been picked up by several blogs and news sites. Emma, I am so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I should have told you who I was from the beginning. Emma stared at him across the small table, and Marcus watched as understanding dawned in her eyes. Not just about his identity, but about what his identity meant for her and Sofia's privacy and safety. Nexus Innovations, she repeated slowly. I've heard of that company. You're Marcus Chen, the Marcus Chen. Yes, the guy who's on the cover of magazines, who gets invited to White House state dinners, whose net worth is a matter of public speculation. Yes. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but cold. Were you ever planning to tell me? Yes, I wanted to tell you yesterday, but Sofia was having such a good time, and I didn't want to ruin the day. I was going to tell you Friday night at dinner. Friday night. Emma laughed bitterly. Right, our date at the little Italian place in my neighborhood. Very romantic, getting to know the real you over breadsticks and house wine. Emma, please. I know this is a shock, but my feelings for you are completely real. Everything I've told you about myself is true. I just left out the part about the money. The part about the money. Emma's voice was rising, and other patrons of the coffee shop were starting to glance in their direction. Marcus, you're not talking about making good money versus great money. You're talking about being rich enough to buy small countries. That's not a detail you forgot to mention. That's a fundamental deception. I know, Marcus said quietly. You're right. I should have told you immediately. But Emma, you have to understand. Most people, when they find out who I am, they change. They start seeing dollar signs instead of a person. They want something from me. You were the first person in years who just saw me as Marcus, and you were the first person in years who made me feel like maybe I could trust someone again. Emma shot back. Do you know what it's like being a single mother in this city? Do you know how many men I've met who seem great until they realize that dating me means dating Sofia too? Means dealing with soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences and staying home when she's sick. Marcus started to respond, but Emma held up her hand. I'm not finished. You were different. You listened to her talk about octopi for 4 hours yesterday without getting bored. You asked her real questions about her dreams. You made her feel important and heard. And the whole time you were lying to both of us. I wasn't lying. Omitting the truth is still lying, Marcus. Especially when the truth is something that affects my daughter's safety. Emma's voice broke slightly. God, Sofia. What if someone tries to use her to get to you? What if paparazzi start following her to school? I've already arranged for security, Marcus said quickly. Discreet protection for both of you. No one will get near Sofia, I promise. Emma stared at him in shock. You arranged security, without asking me, without even telling me. I had to make sure you were both safe. You had to? Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Marcus, you don't get to make decisions about my daughter's life without consulting me. I don't care how much money you have or how good your intentions are. Marcus stood as well, reaching toward her. Emma, please just let me explain. Explain what? That you thought it was okay to deceive me about who you are. That you thought it was okay to put my daughter at risk for media attention without her consent or mine. That you've now assigned security to watch us like we're your property to be protected. That's not how I see you, isn't it? Emma's eyes were bright with tears and fury. The billionaire swoops in to protect the helpless single mother and her child. How generous of you. Emma, that's not fair. You know that's not how I see you. Do I? Because right now I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about you. Emma grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and angry. I need some time to think about this, about what this means for Sofia and me. Can I call you tonight? Can we talk about this when you've had some time to process? I don't know, Emma said honestly. I need to figure out if the man I thought I was falling for actually exists, or if he's just another billionaire who thinks money can solve every problem. With that, Emma walked out of Muddy Waters, leaving Marcus alone at their corner table with 2 abandoned coffee cups, and the crushing realization that telling the truth had been exactly as devastating as he'd feared it would be. Marcus sat there for several minutes, replaying the conversation and trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. Every instinct told him to follow Emma, to keep explaining until she understood that his feelings were real despite his deception. But Emma's anger had been justified, and Marcus was beginning to understand that this situation couldn't be fixed with the same strategic thinking that had built his empire. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Media attention is intensifying. TMZ is offering $10,000 for Emma's contact information. We need to discuss how to handle this. Marcus stared at the message, his stomach churning. Emma was right. He'd put her and Sofia in an impossible position. By pursuing a relationship without revealing his identity, he'd made them targets for the kind of invasive media attention that could make their lives miserable. He typed back, "Double the security detail, and find out who's offering money for information about Emma. I want to know who's investigating her and Sofia." Marcus drove home through the Seattle afternoon, his mind racing through possible solutions and coming up empty. How do you undo the exposure that comes with being photographed, with one of the most recognizable tech moguls in the world? How do you protect someone who doesn't want your protection? The penthouse felt even more isolated than usual when he arrived home. Marcus poured himself a scotch and sat at his piano, a Steinway grand that had been featured in several architectural magazines, but that he rarely played anymore. His fingers found the keys automatically, playing a melancholy melody he'd learned as a child. Music had been his first love. Before technology, before algorithms, before the relentless pursuit of market dominance had consumed his life. His mother had insisted on piano lessons despite the expense, believing that music would teach him discipline and emotional expression in ways that math and science couldn't. Now, as Marcus played in his empty penthouse, he thought about Emma's accusation that he saw her as someone to be rescued, rather than as an equal partner. The thought troubled him more than he wanted to admit, because it forced him to examine his own motivations in a way he'd been avoiding. Had he been attracted to Emma partly because she seemed to need rescuing? Was there something appealing about being able to solve her financial problems with what amounted to pocket change for him? The possibility that his feelings might be tainted with a savior complex made Marcus feel sick. But then he remembered the way Emma had looked at Sofia during their day at the aquarium, with such fierce pride and love that it had taken Marcus's breath away. Emma wasn't someone who needed rescuing. She was someone who rescued herself every day, while raising a remarkable daughter and caring for sick children in one of the most demanding jobs in the world. Marcus's phone rang, interrupting his musical self-reflection. David's name appeared on the screen. "I saw the news," David said without preamble when Marcus answered. "Are you okay?" Define okay. Still breathing, not making any dramatic gestures that will require me to drive up from Portland to stage an intervention. Still breathing, Marcus confirmed. Everything else is questionable. Want to talk about it? Marcus found himself spilling the entire story. Meeting Emma at the laundromat, their perfect day at the aquarium, the devastating conversation at Muddy Waters. David listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or concern. "So, let me get this straight," David said when Marcus finished. "You met an amazing woman and her daughter. You had the best week of your life, and now you've managed to screw it up by being yourself. That's one way to put it. Marcus, do you remember what you were like before all this?" David's voice was gentle but firm. "Before the money, before the fame, before you became Seattle's most eligible bachelor?" "Vaguely. You were the guy who took apart every electronic device in our house to understand how it worked. You were the guy who spent his allowance buying components to build radios for elderly neighbors who couldn't afford new ones. You were the guy who wanted to invent things that would make people's lives better." Marcus was quiet, remembering that version of himself. "The money changed you," David continued. "Not all bad changes. You've accomplished incredible things, helped a lot of people through your company. But somewhere along the way, you started seeing yourself as separate from everyone else. Above them, maybe. Responsible for them, but not equal to them. That's not, isn't it? You arranged security for Emma and Sofia without asking. You made decisions about their lives based on what you thought was best, not on what they wanted. That's not partnership, Marcus. That's control." David's words hit harder than Emma's anger had, because Marcus recognized the truth in them. He'd spent so many years being the person who made decisions, who solved problems, who took responsibility for outcomes, that he'd forgotten how to be an equal participant in a relationship. "So what do I do?" Marcus asked. "How do I fix this?" "I don't know if you can," David said honestly. "But if you're going to try, you need to start by figuring out who you are when you're not trying to solve everyone else's problems." Emma fell for Marcus, not Marcus Chen, the billionaire CEO. But she also didn't fall for Marcus Chen, the guy who thinks he knows what's best for everyone. After David hung up, Marcus sat at his piano for another hour, thinking about his brother's words, and trying to remember the last time he'd approached a problem without automatically assuming he needed to control the outcome. The smart ring on his finger pulsed gently, detecting stress hormones and recommending a meditation session. Marcus almost laughed. Even his technology was trying to manage his emotional state. He pulled off the ring and set it aside, tired of being monitored and measured and optimized. Outside his penthouse windows, Seattle was settling into evening. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably putting Sofia to bed, maybe reading stories about marine biology and fielding questions about why Marcus hadn't been able to come to her soccer game after all. Marcus closed his eyes and made a decision. He couldn't undo the exposure he'd brought to Emma and Sofia's lives, and he couldn't take back the deception that had shattered Emma's trust. But he could stop making decisions for them and start respecting Emma's need for space and time to figure out what she wanted. It was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done, harder than his first board presentation, harder than taking Nexus Innovations public, harder than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. But for the first time in years, Marcus Chen was going to wait for someone else to decide what happened next. 5 days passed without contact from Emma. 5 days during which Marcus learned what it felt like to check his phone compulsively, hoping for a text message that never came. 5 days during which he canceled meetings, ignored calls from investors, and drove his assistant to the brink of resignation by refusing to engage with the media circus surrounding his mystery relationship. The security team reported that Emma was maintaining her normal routines, work, taking Sofia to school, grocery shopping, but that she was clearly aware of their presence. She'd even approached one of the plainclothes officers outside Sofia's elementary school to demand identification and an explanation for why strangers were watching her daughter. "She's not happy about the protection detail," the security supervisor had reported during their daily check-in. "But she's not trying to lose us either. I think she understands the necessity even if she doesn't like it." Marcus had wanted to call Emma then, to explain that the security was temporary, just until media interest died down. But David's words kept echoing in his head. "That's not partnership, Marcus. That's control." So Marcus waited and tried to figure out who he was when he wasn't trying to manage every variable in his life. The answer, he discovered, was someone who had forgotten how to exist in uncertainty. For years, Marcus had used data and analysis to predict outcomes, to minimize risk, to maintain control over his environment. But feelings couldn't be quantified, relationships couldn't be optimized, and love, because he was finally admitting to himself that's what this was, didn't respond to strategic planning. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after their confrontation at Muddy Waters, Emma finally called. "Marcus?" Her voice was tired but not angry. "Emma, how are you? How's Sofia?" "We're okay. Adapting to having bodyguards, which is not something I ever imagined would be part of my life." "I know, I'm sorry about that. If you want me to remove the security detail—" "No," Emma interrupted. "I don't like it. But I understand why it's necessary. A reporter showed up at the hospital yesterday, trying to get information about me from my coworkers. Having protection makes sense, even if I hate needing it." Marcus felt a surge of anger toward whoever was harassing Emma at work, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Are you and Sofia safe? Are the security measures sufficient?" "We're fine. They're professionals and they're discreet. Sofia thinks her new friends, who happen to be everywhere we go, are part of some kind of game." Emma paused. "She asks about you every day." Marcus's chest tightened. "What do you tell her?" "That you're busy with work. She wants to know if you're still coming to her soccer game on Saturday." The hope in Marcus's voice was embarrassing even to himself. "Am I? That depends on whether you can answer a question honestly." "Anything. Who are you, Marcus? Not Marcus Chen, the billionaire. Not the guy who owns Nexus Innovations. Who are you when all of that is stripped away?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about David's words and his own week of forced introspection. "I don't know," he said finally. "I've been Marcus Chen, the CEO, for so long that I'm not sure who I am without that identity. But I know who I want to be." "Tell me." "I want to be someone worthy of you and Sofia. Someone who doesn't assume he knows what's best for everyone else. Someone who can be part of a partnership instead of trying to control it." Emma sighed softly. "Marcus, I've been thinking about this all week. About you, about us, about what this means for Sofia." Marcus held his breath, waiting. "I was angry about the deception, but I understand why you did it. And I was angry about the security, but I understand why you arranged it. What I can't understand is how we move forward from here." "What do you mean?" "I mean that your life and mine exist in completely different universes. I'm a single mother who works 12-hour shifts and drives a 15-year-old Honda. You're a billionaire who gets invited to state dinners and has his photo taken at charity galas with celebrities. Those worlds don't naturally intersect." "They intersected in a laundromat," Marcus pointed out, "by accident, and look what happened. One day at the aquarium turned into a media circus that required bodyguards for my 7-year-old daughter." Marcus could hear the exhaustion in Emma's voice, the weight of trying to figure out how to protect Sofia while navigating feelings she'd never expected to have. "Emma," he said carefully, "what if we took this slowly? What if we figured out how to blend our worlds instead of choosing between them? How? I don't know yet. But I know that what we have is too important to walk away from without trying." Emma was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could hear Sofia chattering in the background about something related to Dr. Tentacles and marine biology research. "Sofia wants to show you her new soccer moves," Emma said eventually. "She's been practicing all week. Does that mean I can come to her game? It means we can try taking this one day at a time and see what happens." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was hope, and Marcus would take it. "Thank you," he said. "Emma, I know this is complicated. Yes. But I want you to know that my feelings for you and Sofia are the most real thing in my life right now." "Mine too," Emma said softly. "That's why this is so scary." After they hung up, Marcus sat in his penthouse looking out over Seattle and thinking about soccer games and 7-year-old dreams, and the possibility that love might be more powerful than all the complications that came with his public life. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss media strategy. Also, Forbes wants to do a feature on how your relationship is changing your public image. Should I set up the interview? Marcus stared at the message, thinking about Emma's question. Who are you when everything else is stripped away? He typed back, cancel the Forbes interview and clear my schedule for Saturday morning. I have a soccer game to attend. For the first time in a week, Marcus fell asleep easily, his smart ring detecting normalized stress levels and improved sleep patterns. Some things, it turned out, didn't need to be optimized or analyzed or strategically managed. Some things just needed to be lived. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect Pacific Northwest days when the mountains were visible from everywhere in the city, and the air felt like possibility itself. Marcus arrived at Volunteer Park 20 minutes early, carrying a bouquet of flowers for Emma and a small gift for Sofia, a book about marine biology that he'd found at Elliott Bay Books, inscribed with a message about following your dreams wherever they lead. He spotted Emma immediately, setting up folding chairs on the sideline with the other parents. She was wearing jeans and a Seattle Sounders sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and Marcus felt that familiar jolt of attraction mixed with something deeper, the recognition of home in human form. Sofia came running over as soon as she saw him, her small soccer cleats clicking against the pavement. Marcus! You came! Did you see my new shin guards? They have octopi on them! She lifted her leg to show off purple shin guards decorated with cartoon cephalopods. Those are amazing, Marcus said, kneeling down to her level. Dr. Tentacles would be proud. He is. He's been helping me practice. Mom says imaginary friends can't actually help with soccer skills, but I think she's wrong about that too. Emma approached more cautiously, accepting the flowers with a small smile that didn't quite hide her nervousness. You didn't have to bring flowers. I wanted to, Marcus said simply. How are you? Terrified, Emma admitted, but trying to focus on the fact that Sofia's been looking forward to this all week. They settled into their folding chairs as the 8-year-old soccer teams took the field for warm-ups. Marcus quickly realized that recreational youth soccer bore little resemblance to the professional sport. It was more like controlled chaos with occasional moments of actual soccer mixed in. Fair warning, Emma said, watching Sofia practice dribbling with about as much coordination as expected from a 7-year-old. This is not going to be high-quality athletic competition. It's mostly kids running around and occasionally kicking the ball in the right direction. Sounds perfect, Marcus said, and meant it. The game itself was exactly as advertised. 22 children between the ages of 6 and 8, chasing a soccer ball around a small field, while their parents cheered enthusiastically for every minor accomplishment. Sofia spent the first half running in roughly the same direction as the ball, occasionally getting close enough to kick it, usually in the wrong direction. She's got enthusiasm, Marcus observed as Sofia celebrated wildly after accidentally kicking the ball to a teammate. She's got that from me, Emma said, laughing. I've never been particularly athletic either, but Sofia loves being part of a team. Marcus watched Sofia high-five her teammates and suddenly understood something about Emma's parenting philosophy. It wasn't about Sofia being the best at soccer. It was about Sofia learning to be part of something bigger than herself, learning that showing up and trying your best was more important than winning. She's lucky to have you as a mom, Marcus said quietly. Emma glanced at him, something softening in her expression. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from someone who clearly thinks she's pretty special too. In the second half, Sofia managed to kick the ball in the right direction 3 times, assist on what might generously be called a goal, and trip spectacularly while trying to steal the ball from an opponent. She popped up immediately, grinning and giving Marcus and Emma a thumbs up from the field. That's my girl, Emma said proudly. Never stays down for long. The game ended in a tie, which in recreational youth soccer apparently meant everyone won. Sofia ran over to where Marcus and Emma were packing up their chairs, sweaty and grass-stained and radiating pure joy. Did you see my almost goal? She asked breathlessly, And my super cool fall? I think that was my best fall ever. I saw everything, Marcus said. You were incredible out there. Mom, can Marcus come get ice cream with us? The team always gets ice cream after games, and I want to show him my medal. Emma hesitated, glancing at Marcus. They'd agreed to take things one day at a time, but ice cream with the soccer team felt like a step toward normalcy that might not be possible given the circumstances of Marcus's public life. If it's okay with your mom, Marcus said carefully, I'd love to celebrate your amazing game with ice cream. Emma looked around the park, noting the discreet presence of the security team positioned at various points around the field. Okay, she said finally, but somewhere quiet, away from crowds. They ended up at a small ice cream shop in Capitol Hill, the same neighborhood where Marcus had first met Emma at the laundromat. Sofia ordered a sundae that was bigger than her head, while Marcus and Emma shared meaningful glances over her enthusiastic description of each goal, near goal, and spectacular fall from the game. Marcus, Sofia said around a mouthful of chocolate ice cream, are you going to be my mom's boyfriend? Emma choked slightly on her coffee while Marcus tried to figure out how to answer a 7-year-old's direct question about his romantic intentions. Sofia, Emma said, that's not really something we need to discuss right now. Why not? I like Marcus. He asks good questions, and he came to my soccer game and he brought me a book about octopi. Those are all good boyfriend qualities. What do you know about boyfriend qualities? Emma asked, amused despite her embarrassment. Lily's mom has a boyfriend, and he never comes to Lily's soccer games, and he doesn't know anything about marine biology. Marcus is way better than Lily's mom's boyfriend. Marcus couldn't help laughing. That's quite an endorsement. Sofia, Emma said gently, Marcus and I are still figuring things out. Sometimes grown-up relationships are complicated. Because he's rich? Sofia asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. Emma and Marcus stared at her in shock. I heard some of the other moms talking, Sofia continued matter-of-factly. They said Marcus is famous and has lots of money, and that's why there were photographers at the aquarium. But I don't think that's complicated at all. You don't? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about a 7-year-old's perspective on wealth disparity in relationships. Nope. Having money just means you can afford better ice cream. But you still have to be nice to people and ask good questions and care about octopi. Money doesn't make you a good person. Being good makes you a good person. Emma looked at her daughter with obvious pride mixed with amazement. How did you get so wise? I pay attention, Sofia said seriously. Also, I watch a lot of documentaries. As they walked back to Emma's car, Sofia skipping ahead with her soccer ball and new book, Marcus felt something settling in his chest, a kind of peace he hadn't experienced in years. She's incredible, he said to Emma. You've raised an incredible human being. She is pretty amazing, Emma agreed, even if she does have strong opinions about everything from cephalopod intelligence to adult relationships. They reached Emma's Honda, and Marcus helped load Sofia's soccer gear while she chatted about her next game and whether Dr. Tentacles might be able to attend as a spectator. Marcus, Emma said as Sofia buckled herself into her car seat, would you like to have dinner this week, just us like we originally planned? I'd love that, Marcus said. But Emma, I need you to know, I don't want to change you or Sofia or your life together. I just want to find a way to be part of it. Emma studied his face for a moment, then smiled. The first completely unguarded smile she'd given him since their confrontation at Muddy Waters. I'd like that too, she said, but I have one condition. Anything. Next time we go somewhere public together, you warn me first if there might be cameras. I want to be prepared, and I want Sofia to understand what's happening rather than finding out from overheard conversations between soccer moms. Deal, Marcus said immediately. Complete transparency from now on. As Marcus watched Emma and Sofia drive away, Sofia waving enthusiastically from the back seat, he felt his phone buzz with the familiar notification from his smart ring. But this time, instead of detecting stress or elevated heart rate, the device registered something it had never measured before, Contentment. Marcus looked down at the glowing notification and laughed. Some algorithms, it seemed, were finally learning to recognize the metrics that actually mattered. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of his penthouse attempting to make dinner for Emma and Sofia. It was their first time visiting his home, and Marcus had spent the previous day child-proofing the apartment and stocking his usually empty refrigerator with the kind of food that might appeal to a 7-year-old marine biologist. The experiment was not going well. Marcus had vastly overestimated his culinary skills, and the kitchen now looked like a disaster zone. Smoke was rising from something in the oven, pasta water was boiling over on the stovetop, and the salad he'd attempted looked more like a crime scene than a vegetable course. "Do you need help?" Emma asked, appearing in the doorway with barely concealed amusement. "I think I've overestimated my domestic capabilities," Marcus admitted, frantically stirring something that might once have been marinara sauce. "Sofia, come look at this," Emma called. Marcus is discovering that being good at algorithms doesn't automatically make you good at cooking. Sofia appeared, took one look at the chaos, and shook her head sadly. "This is why Mom and I order pizza a lot." "Pizza sounds like an excellent backup plan," Marcus said gratefully. While they waited for pizza delivery, Sofia explored the penthouse with the focused attention she usually reserved for marine life documentaries. She was particularly fascinated by Marcus's home office, with its multiple monitors and wall-mounted screens displaying real-time data from Nexus Innovations. "This is like a spaceship command center," she announced, spinning in Marcus's ergonomic desk chair. "Do you control satellites from here?" "Not satellites," Marcus said, "but I can monitor our company's projects from anywhere in the world." "Can you see what's happening in the oceans? Like, can you track whales and stuff?" Marcus paused, an idea forming. "Actually, we do have some marine monitoring technology. Would you like to see?" For the next hour, Marcus gave Sofia a tour of Nexus Innovations' environmental monitoring systems, showing her real-time data from ocean sensors that tracked temperature, acidity levels, and marine life patterns. Sofia was entranced, asking questions that demonstrated both her extensive knowledge of marine biology and her intuitive understanding of how technology could be used for conservation. "You could totally use this to help save the whales," she said seriously. "If you can track where they are and what's happening to their environment, then you can figure out how to protect them better." "That's exactly right," Marcus said, impressed by her reasoning. "In fact, that gives me an idea for a new project." Emma had been watching this exchange from the couch, and Marcus caught her eye over Sofia's head. The look she gave him was warm and complicated, pride in her daughter mixed with something that might have been affection for Marcus. After Sofia fell asleep on Marcus's couch, exhausted by her exploration of high-tech marine conservation possibilities, Emma and Marcus sat on his balcony looking out over the Seattle skyline. "She likes you," Emma said simply. "Really likes you, not just the novelty of you. The feeling is mutual. She's extraordinary. The way she thinks about problems, the way she connects disparate pieces of information. She's going to change the world someday." "I know," Emma said proudly. "Sometimes I look at her and think about everything she could become, and it terrifies me. Not because I doubt her abilities, but because the world doesn't always reward smart women who ask too many questions." Marcus turned to look at Emma, struck by the weight of responsibility she carried as Sofia's mother. "She's lucky to have you advocating for her. She's lucky to have people who believe in her potential," Emma said meaningfully. They were quiet for a moment, watching the city lights twinkle below them. "Marcus," Emma said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "What do you want from this, from us, I mean, not just the romantic relationship, but what do you see when you look at me and Sofia?" Marcus considered her question carefully. Over the past few weeks, as he'd gotten to know Emma and Sofia better, his feelings had deepened and evolved beyond simple attraction or even love. What he felt now was more like recognition, the sense that he'd found the people who could make him the best version of himself. "I see home," he said finally. "I see the life I want to build." The person I want to become. I see a brilliant little girl who challenges me to think differently about everything, and a woman who makes me want to be worthy of her trust." Emma smiled, but there was sadness in it too. "And I see a man who could give Sofia opportunities I never could. Educational experiences, travel, exposure to ideas and possibilities that I can't provide on a nurse's salary." "Emma, let me finish. I also see a man who asks Sofia real questions about her dreams and listens to her answers like they matter, who shows up to soccer games and celebrates her enthusiasm more than her skill, who looks at her like she's already everything she could ever become." Emma paused, looking out over the city. "The money stuff scares me, Marcus, not because I want your money, but because I'm afraid it will change the dynamic between us. I'm afraid you'll start seeing me as someone to be rescued instead of someone to be partnered with." "That won't happen," Marcus said firmly. "How can you be sure?" Marcus thought about his brother's words, about his own week of introspection after their confrontation at Muddy Waters. "Because you won't let it. Because Sofia won't let it. Because you've both already made me a better person just by being exactly who you are." Emma leaned against Marcus's shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling more settled than he had in years. "There's something I need to tell you," Emma said quietly. Marcus's stomach clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Okay. I love you," she said. "I'm in love with you, and it terrifies me because I haven't felt this way about anyone since Sofia's father, and we both know how that ended." Marcus felt something expand in his chest, warm and bright and overwhelming. "I love you too, both of you, more than I knew was possible." They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while Seattle glittered below them, and Sofia slept peacefully on the couch inside, Dr. Tentacles clutched in her arms. When they broke apart, Emma smiled up at Marcus with the kind of trust he knew he'd spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure it out together," Marcus said. "One day at a time, like you said. No more decisions made in isolation. No more assumptions about what's best. Just partnership. Even when it's messy?" "Especially when it's messy." Emma laughed, the sound bright with possibility. "Good. Because dating a billionaire while raising a precocious 7-year-old is probably going to be very messy." "I'm counting on it," Marcus said, and meant it. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the wings of the Seattle Convention Center, waiting to deliver the keynote address at Tech Forward, Seattle's premier technology conference. But this wasn't just any presentation. This was the public debut of Nexus Innovation's newest division, Marine Conservation Technology, inspired by a 7-year-old's passionate belief that technology should be used to save the whales. In the audience, Emma sat in the front row next to Sofia, who was wearing her best dress and clutching a small notebook where she'd written down questions about marine monitoring systems. They'd been planning this moment for months, ever since Marcus had proposed creating a conservation technology division, and Sofia had volunteered to be the chief consultant on marine biology applications. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, looking out over the packed auditorium, 6 months ago, I was asked a question that changed my perspective on everything we do at Nexus Innovations. The question was simple. Can you see what's happening in the oceans? But the person asking wasn't a venture capitalist or a fellow CEO. She was a 7-year-old girl who wanted to know if our technology could help save marine life. Marcus found Sofia in the audience, grinning at him with pride and excitement. That question led to the most important project we've ever undertaken, because it reminded me that the best technology isn't just about processing power or market share. It's about solving problems that matter to the people we love. As Marcus presented the new marine monitoring systems that Nexus Innovations had developed in partnership with marine biology programs at the University of Washington, he caught Emma's eye and saw her wiping away tears. They were good tears, he could tell, the kind that came from watching someone you love become the person they were meant to be. After the presentation, as the audience applauded and reporters prepared their questions, Marcus felt his smart ring pulse with a familiar notification, but he didn't need to check the readout to know what it said. His heart rate was elevated, his stress levels were optimized, and every biological marker indicated that Marcus Chen was exactly where he belonged. Later that evening, after the conference reception and the interviews and the congratulations from colleagues who were amazed by the personal transformation of Seattle's most notoriously private tech mogul, Marcus, Emma, and Sofia sat in their favorite booth at a small diner in Capitol Hill, celebrating with milkshakes and French fries. "I have an announcement," Sofia said solemnly, dipping a French fry in her strawberry milkshake with the casual disregard for conventional food combinations that only children possess. "Should we be worried?" Emma asked, sharing an amused glance with Marcus. "I've decided that Marcus can officially be your boyfriend now," Sofia announced. "He passed all the tests." "What tests?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "The octopus test. You have to know interesting facts about marine life. The soccer game test. You have to show up even when the weather is bad and we might lose. The ice cream test. You have to let me order whatever I want and not make faces when I mix weird flavors. And the most important test, you have to make Mom happy without trying to change her." Marcus felt Emma's hand slip into his under the table, her fingers intertwining with his. "Have I passed all the tests?" he asked seriously. "With flying colors," Sofia said. "Plus, you're helping save the whales now, which is basically the best job anyone could have." "I agree completely," Marcus said, "though I should mention I have an announcement too." Emma and Sofia looked at him expectantly. Dr. Tentacles has been accepted into the University of Washington's marine biology program. Full scholarship, starting next fall. Sofia's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Professor Martinez was very impressed with his research proposals. Sofia launched herself across the table to hug Marcus, nearly knocking over 3 milkshakes in the process. "This is the best day ever." As Marcus hugged Sofia back, breathing in the scent of strawberry milkshake and pure childhood joy, he caught Emma's eye over her daughter's head. The look she gave him was full of love and laughter, and the promise of a future more beautiful than any algorithm could have predicted. His smart ring pulsed gently, detecting elevated happiness levels and optimal life satisfaction metrics. But Marcus barely noticed the notification, too busy being present in the moment that had changed everything. One night, one drink, one kiss that had triggered not just a smart ring alert, but a complete revolution in what it meant to be alive. Some connections, it turned out, couldn't be measured by technology. They could only be lived, one perfect, imperfect, beautifully messy day at a time. And Marcus Chen had never been happier to have his algorithms proven wrong. Epilogue. 2 years later, Emma Rodriguez Chen stood in the kitchen of their new home. Not Marcus's penthouse, but a house they'd chosen together in Queen Anne, with enough space for Sofia's growing collection of marine biology books and a backyard perfect for soccer practice. She was making coffee in their slightly less sophisticated but infinitely warmer kitchen when she heard Sofia's voice from the living room. "Mom, Marcus, Dr. Tentacles got accepted to graduate school." Emma smiled, recognizing this as Sofia's way of announcing that she'd received another acceptance letter to a marine biology program. At 9 years old, Sofia had become something of a celebrity in academic circles, the youngest person ever to co-author a paper on marine conservation technology. Her correspondence with universities around the world had become a family joke, with Dr. Tentacles serving as her official research partner and academic representative. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing his pajamas despite the late morning hour, a weekend luxury he'd never allowed himself before Emma and Sofia had taught him the art of sleeping in. "Coffee?" Emma asked, holding up the pot. "Please, I think I'm going to need caffeine to process whatever Sofia's latest academic achievement is." They walked into the living room to find Sofia surrounded by papers and letters, her laptop open to what appeared to be a video call with someone in a lab coat. "Professor Chen wants to know if Dr. Tentacles is available for a summer research program in Hawaii," Sofia announced. I told her he'd have to check his schedule, but I think he's probably free. Emma and Marcus exchanged the kind of look that passed between parents who were still amazed by their extraordinary child, even after 2 years of daily wonder. Hawaii, huh? Marcus said, settling onto the couch next to Sofia. That sounds like serious research. The most serious, Sofia said gravely. They're studying the impact of climate change on coral reef ecosystems. Dr. Tentacles has some theories about adaptive symbiotic relationships that could be revolutionary. Emma curled up on Marcus's other side, coffee mug in hand, watching her husband and daughter discuss marine biology, with the same intensity they'd once brought to their first conversation about octopi. The word husband still felt new and wonderful in Emma's mind, even 6 months after their quiet wedding ceremony in the backyard of this same house, with Sofia as maid of honor and Dr. Tentacles as ring-bearer. There's something else, Sofia said, suddenly serious in the way that usually preceded important announcements. I've been thinking about my career path. Oh? Emma said, trying not to smile at her 9-year-old's discussion of career planning. I've decided I want to start a company like Marcus did, but for marine conservation. I want to build technology that can talk to whales and dolphins and help them avoid shipping lanes and pollution zones. Marcus leaned forward, his attention completely focused on Sofia. That's an incredible idea. Have you thought about the technical challenges involved in developing interspecies communication systems? Actually, yes, Sofia said, pulling out a notebook that was apparently full of diagrams and equations that Emma couldn't begin to understand. I think the key is understanding that different species process information differently. We can't just translate human language into whale language. We need to understand how whales think about concepts like danger and safety and navigation. As Sofia launched into an explanation of her theoretical framework for marine mammal communication technology, Emma found herself marveling at the life they'd built together. It hadn't always been easy, adjusting to the public attention that came with being Marcus's family, learning to navigate the financial disparities between their backgrounds, figuring out how to blend their different worlds into something that worked for all of them. But they'd managed it by holding on to the principles that had brought them together in the first place. Genuine curiosity about each other, respect for each other's strengths and dreams, and an unwavering commitment to putting their family's happiness above everything else. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Saw the article in Forbes about Marcus's Marine Conservation Division. Sofia's going to rule the world someday. Emma showed the message to Marcus, who grinned. Forbes clearly hasn't met our daughter if they think she's only going to rule the world. Sofia's setting her sights on the entire ocean. And possibly Mars, Sofia added, without looking up from her notebook. I read that there might be underwater oceans on some of Jupiter's moons. Someone's going to need to figure out how to talk to alien marine life. Of course they will, Emma said, kissing the top of Sofia's head. And I have a feeling I know exactly who's going to volunteer for that job. As Sofia continued planning her future career in interplanetary marine biology, Emma settled more comfortably against Marcus's side, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with one night, one drink, one kiss that had triggered a smart ring alert Marcus had never expected. But it had become something infinitely more complex and beautiful, a love story that had taught all three of them that the best things in life couldn't be predicted, optimized, or controlled. They could only be discovered, nurtured, and cherished. Marcus's smart ring, which he still wore, though he'd long since stopped obsessing over its data, pulsed gently against his wrist, but he didn't need to check the notification to know what it said. His heart rate was steady, his stress levels were optimal, and every biological marker indicated that Marcus Chen was living exactly the life he was meant to live. Some algorithms, it turned out, were remarkably good at detecting happiness. They just couldn't create it. That required love, trust, and the courage to let someone else change your perfectly ordered world into something beautifully chaotic and infinitely more meaningful. Marcus, Sofia said suddenly, looking up from her notebook with the expression that usually meant she'd just solved a particularly complex problem. I figured out what your smart ring was really measuring that first night. What's that? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about his daughter's interpretation of the technology that had started it all. It wasn't measuring your heart rate or your stress levels, Sofia said with the confidence of someone who understood both marine biology and human emotions far better than most adults. It was measuring the exact moment you realized you'd found your family. The algorithm just didn't know how to label it properly. Emma felt Marcus's arm tighten around her as he processed Sofia's words. When she looked up at his face, she saw tears in his eyes, happy tears, the kind that came from being understood completely by the people you loved most. "You know what, Sofia?" Marcus said, his voice slightly rough with emotion. "I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it was measuring." Sofia nodded approvingly and returned to her notebook, apparently satisfied with her analysis of advanced biometric technology and human bonding patterns. But Emma and Marcus sat quietly for a moment longer, holding each other and marveling at the 9-year-old genius who had just managed to solve the mystery of how love registers in the digital age. Outside their Queen Anne home, Seattle was waking up to another beautiful Pacific Northwest morning. Somewhere in the city, other people were probably having their own unexpected encounters, their own moments of connection that would change everything. But in this living room, with Sofia designing technology to save the world's oceans, and Emma and Marcus holding each other close, the future felt bright with infinite possibility. And if Marcus's smart ring was still detecting elevated happiness levels and optimal life satisfaction metrics, well, that was just confirmation of what they all already knew. Sometimes the most sophisticated technology in the world was no match for the simple, revolutionary power of love. What did you think of Marcus, Emma, and Sofia's incredible journey? From that unexpected night at the laundromat to building a life together that none of them could have predicted, their story shows us that the most meaningful connections often happen when we least expect them. What was your favorite moment from their story? Was it Sofia's marine biology enthusiasm, Marcus learning to be vulnerable, or Emma's strength in protecting her daughter while opening her heart to love? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing which parts of these stories resonate most with our amazing community. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed following along with Marcus and Emma's love story. And make sure to subscribe for more incredible tales of unexpected romance, family bonds, and the beautiful way love can transform our lives. More amazing stories are coming your way, and trust us, you won't want to miss what we have planned next. Thanks for spending this time with us. And until next time, remember that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary moments.